Have you ever heard a story that just feels familiar? You know, like you've heard it before, but maybe in a different time or a different place? Well, today we're going to unpack one of those exact stories. It's a tale of love, betrayal, and virtue that seems pretty simple on the surface, but it's actually holding a universal blueprint for how entire societies deal with massive world-altering change. Okay, so let's just dive right in. On one side, you have the famous story of Yusuf, or Joseph, and Zuleika from the Quran and the Bible. And on the other, you have the great Persian epic of Prince Siavesh and his stepmother Sudaba. I mean, just look at the plot points here. They are practically identical. You've got a virtuous young man in a royal court, a powerful woman who's married to the king falling for him, a rejected invitation, a false accusation made in anger, and then a totally unjust punishment. It's the same story.
The parallels are just way too close to ignore, right? So what's the deal? Is this just a case of one culture borrowing a story from another? Or are we actually looking at something much deeper? Evidence of a shared human story, an archetype that's been echoing through our collective minds for thousands of years.
Well, as it turns out, this is not just about two stories. Not even close. We're talking about a global pattern here. An archetypal narrative that has shown up in countless cultures, across different continents, and over thousands of years. This is no coincidence. It is a fundamental human story. And the sheer scale of this is just mind-blowing. We find this exact same narrative blueprint everywhere. It's in ancient Greece with the myth of Phaedra and her stepson Hippolytus, but then get this, it's also in Tibetan Buddhist texts, it pops up in Irish folklore, in tales from the Mabundu people in Africa, and even in Native American legends from tribes like the Cree and Tunica. From East Asia to Europe to the Americas, this story just keeps getting told over and over again.
And this story is ancient. The very first version we have in writing comes all the way from ancient Egypt. It's called The Tale of Two Brothers, and it dates back to the 2nd millennium BC. From there, it just travels through time. It appears in classic Greek tragedies. It becomes this huge cornerstone of the Persian national epic, the Shahnameh, and then centuries later, it shows up again in a Tibetan story about a queen and a monk. This story clearly strikes a very deep chord with us as humans.
So why? Why is this story so sticky? Well, it's because it follows a very specific and, honestly, a very psychologically satisfying formula. It's a journey in 4 acts, a path that both the woman, who represents this sort of forbidden desire, and the man, who represents virtuous resistance, have to walk.
This journey almost always follows the same 4 steps. It all kicks off with a sin. That sin, of course, leads to punishment. This is followed by a period of atonement, and finally, the whole thing wraps up with redemption. For both of them, let's break down how that actually works.
So what's so fascinating is how both characters follow this path but in parallel ways. The woman's sin is that she actively expresses a love that shatters the rules of her society. The man's sin, if you can call it that, is simply being the object of that forbidden love. For her punishment, she often suffers physically, like Zuleika, who grows old and blind. He, on the other hand, suffers socially. Yusuf gets thrown in prison. Then, for atonement, she goes through this major spiritual transformation. She confesses, she does penance, while he just patiently endures his unjust fate, which only proves his virtue even more. And finally, redemption. She is purified, sometimes her youth is even restored, while he is publicly proven innocent and rises to a position of incredible power.
Okay, so we've seen the pattern, we've seen the structure. But that brings us to the most important question of all. Why? Why does this specific story persist? This is where we get to the true hidden meaning.
I mean, think about it. Why would so many different cultures, many with no contact with each other, tell the exact same story? Is it really just about desire and honor? Or is all the romance and betrayal just a metaphor for something much, much bigger?
So here's the big reveal. The crucial point is that this story isn't actually about a man and a woman. It's an allegory. It's a metaphor for a massive societal transformation. The woman, with her chaotic, rule-breaking desire, represents the old order. You know, the established pagan beliefs, maybe matriarchal traditions, the old ways of doing things. And the man, with his unbreakable virtue and piety, represents the new order, a rising patriarchal system, a new monotheistic religion, a whole new set of laws.
And this isn't just a wild theory. As one researcher puts it, the conflict is fundamentally religious and social, a battle between the old and the new. You see, the woman's sin isn't just forbidden love. It's her symbolic resistance to this new system. And the man's virtue isn't just about his personal integrity. It's the symbolic strength and righteousness of the entire new system that's taking over.
And that whole 4-step journey to redemption,
That's basically a roadmap for how the society integrates this massive change. The punishment and atonement parts symbolize the painful, messy period of transition, and the final redemption, which often ends in a legitimate marriage between the two, signifies the successful merger of the old and the new. The old order is tamed, it's purified, and it's brought into harmony with the new order, creating a brand new, stable society.
So this is way more than just some old story. It's a powerful psychological and social tool that our ancestors used to make sense of their changing world. And believe it or not, it has some pretty profound implications for how we tell stories even today.
So here's the key takeaway. When a society goes through a radical shift, I'm talking a change in religion, social structure, political power, the whole shebang, it needs a story to explain and justify that change. This archetype provides the perfect narrative for that. It frames the old way as being chaotic and sinful, and the new way as virtuous and orderly. It makes the transformation feel not just necessary, but destined and righteous.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. This ancient blueprint for storytelling, it's still with us. It never really went away. So the next time you watch a movie or read a book about a conflict between an old establishment and some new disruptive force, ask yourself, what great clash of worlds is being written into our stories today?